Boker Tov, we're going to start today. Daf Yomi is Yevamos 64. We're going to start the bottom line of 63b, the bottom of 63b. So the Talmud tells us, Tanya Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, it states, we're talking about the mitzvah of having children. And if a person has a choice, the person should not choose to not have children. The Gemara does not approve of that choice. Talmud says, Omar, when God rested, Shuva Hashem, when the ark rested, it says, Shuva Hashem, return, Rivavos Alpha Yisrael, return to the Rivavot. The Rivavah is 10,000, so return to the 20,000 Alpha Yisrael, plus another 2,000, 22,000 Jews. God's presence is going to rest on 22,000 Jews. This teaches us, on top of 64a, God's presence does not rest on less than 22,000 Jews. Excuse me. Harei shayu Yisrael. Shnei alafim u'shnei revavos chaser echad. Let's say there were 21,999. And then the last person said, you know what, I don't want to have a child. That's the one who caused the divine presence to depart from Israel. One person, when I was having children, so I remember one Chabad Shliach said to me, I said to him, how many children are you supposed to have? He says, you have one more. So he says, you never know. You never know, that one could be the one that causes the divine presence to rest upon the Jewish people. That one could be the one who's the difference maker. So Abba Chanan Amar Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Chayav Misa. He says, if you decide that you do not want to have children, then you're liable for death. As it states, Uvanim lo hayu lahem. About Nadav and Avihu were sons of Aaron, and they died before Hashem. And it says in the pasuk, Uvanim lo hayu lahem. They didn't have children. This is why, according to the Talmud, this is why they died. If they had children, they would not have died. Others teach, and Acherim in the Talmud is usually a reference to Rabbi Meir. The Acherim teach, if you do not have children, you cause a divine presence to depart from Israel. As it states, during the Brit Bein Absarim, God says, be for you for a God and for your seed after you. When you have seed, then the Shechina Shora, then the divine presence rests upon you. When you don't have seed, Ami Shora, who is the divine presence going to rest upon? God's presence not going to rest upon you, it's going to rest upon wood and stones. Just want to pause, acknowledge that this is obviously for people who want to have children, who are spending their whole life thinking about that. This is obviously a very painful Gemara. So the Gemara is not talking about people who are trying to get married or trying to have children and just haven't had success in that area. Gemara is referring to people who intentionally are making the choice that they don't want to have children, like people who believe that the biggest issue facing the world is population control, and they're spending millions of their dollars to try and prevent people from having children. That's what the Talmud's referring to. So the Nasa Isha, so let's say a man marries his wife, the Sha'ima Eser Shanim, and then he lives with her for 10 years, and he doesn't give birth, and she doesn't give birth. He's not allowed to cancel the mitzvah of Pru Vu. Rashi says either he should divorce her or he should take a second wife at that point, because he has to have children. He has the mitzvah of Pru Vu. So we rule today, there are many great rabbis who did not have, who were married to their wife for many years without children, and they did not divorce their wife. So we don't require it today, but the Talmud says that you have to do it. You have to divorce. Girsha, let's say he divorced her, muteras le'naseh la'acher. Then she's allowed to marry somebody else. And the second person she marries can stay with her for 10 years. And if he divorces her, if she miscarries, then you have to count from the time of the miscarriage. You restart the clock. Tan Rabban rabbis to Nasa Isha v'Shayma Eser Shanim v'lo Yolada. Let's say he's married to this woman and he stays with her for 10 years. Yotzi v'yitin ksuba. He divorces her, but he has to pay her the ksuba. The ksuba is the marriage bond. Basically, on the event of a divorce, you have to pay this amount of money. It's a bond on the marriage, a lien on all the husband's assets. So we see from here, from the fact that he has to pay her, it proves that it's not her fault. Because if it was her fault, he wouldn't have to pay her the basically the marriage penalty. And the reason is Shema lo zachol ibanos minena. Maybe he's the reason. Maybe he's the one who hasn't merited, and so he has to remarry somebody else. And this idea of 10 years is when you divorce after 10 years and take a second wife, even though there's no explicit verse about it in the Torah, there's a hint to it because it states, 10 years after Avram was living in the land of Canaan, that's when he went and he took Hagar as his concubine. So we see from here that after 10 years you take a concubine, you take a second wife, or you move on from the first wife. But Abraham and Sarah were they much older than they were married for many more years than 10 years. So why only after 10 years does it specify? So it tells us when they were living outside the land of Israel, they didn't have the merits of the land of Israel, so we don't count those 10 years. So let's say we have another extenuating circumstance to say why they didn't have children. Maybe he has sick temporarily, or she was sick, or where they were captured in prison. Then those don't count towards the 10 years. Because you have reasons to extenuating circumstances. Well, what he's saying, you say 10 years, but Yitzchak was married to Rebecca for 20 years before they had a child, and he didn't divorce her. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebecca. And Isaac was 60 when they gave birth to Jacob and Esau. So it was 20 years. No, Yitzchak was different. Yitzchak knew that the reason why he didn't have children was Akorhaya, because he was sterile. Well, if that's the case, and we're going to prove that Yitzchak was sterile in a few moments, but Avram was also sterile. Avram was also sterile. Avram Nami Akorhaya. Avram was also sterile. So Gemara says, well, the reason why we're told that Yitzchak was 60 and 20 when he got married, 40 when he got married, and 60 when he gave birth, when Rebecca gave birth, was because we only need it because of what Rabbi Chia bar Abba taught. It's there to teach us something else. It's a reference to Rabbi Chia bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan Megillah. Remember the Gemara Megillah, we did this, that the only reason why we count the years of Yishmael was to tell us, to figure out that there was a gap in Jacob's life of 14 unaccounted years. And during those 14 years, Jacob was studying in Yeshiva Shem Aver. And the reason why that there's this gap is to tell us that he's not punished for not honoring his father and mother during those 14 years because he was studying in Yeshiva. If you're studying in Yeshiva, then it's not good, and you don't visit home. It's because you're studying in Yeshiva, so it's a good reason. So therefore, you're not punished for that. So that's how we count it up. Why were the years of Yishmael counted? In order to count the lineage of Jacob. Yitzchak, our forefather, was Akar. He was sterile. As it states, Yitzchak beseeched God opposite his wife. It doesn't say he did it on behalf of his wife. He did it opposite his wife. This teaches us that both Isaac and Rebecca were sterile. Well, the Gemara says, it should say, why does it say, and God answered him? It should say, God answered them. So why does it say God only answered Isaac's prayer? Why doesn't it say he answered Rebecca's? Gemara explains, because you can't compare the prayers of the righteous one, the son of a righteous one, to the prayers of the righteous one, the son of a wicked one. And so because Isaac was the son of Abraham, he had more merits, so God answered his prayers rather than Rebecca. She was the daughter of a wicked one, Bethuel, and so therefore God did not answer her prayers. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. So Rabbi Yitzchak has the question: why were our holy patriarchs and matriarchs sterile? God prays, God desires the prayers of the righteous. So therefore he makes them sterile. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, why are the prayers of the righteous like compared to a tar, to a pitchfork? Because it says Vayeyaser lo. It says in the verse, it says Vayetar Yitzchak Hashem Nochach Ishto. So why is it used this word for prayer here? Vayetar. It's like the same word as a pitchfork. Just like a pitchfork takes the crops and throws it all around, so too the prayers of the righteous overturns the attributes of God from a harsh place to a merciful place. That's the concept. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yami, Avram v'Sara tumtumin hayu. We had said that they were sterile. So we're on the very bottom line of 64a. Avram and Sarah were tumtumin. That tumtum is somebody whose genitalia is covered up, so you're not able to determine what their gender is. So therefore, Abraham and Sarah had their genitalia covered up. They were sterile. They weren't able to reproduce, as it states, Habitu el Tzur. Look, stare at the rock and hew it out. We're on the top of 64b. Makevet bor nukartem. And chutzavtem, Rashi says, means make their male genitalia. And look at the pit, and nukartem, Rashi says, it means make the female genitalia. Meaning to say, they were praying, Abraham and Sarah were praying to get their genitalia uncovered. Look to Abraham, your father, and to Sarah, and to Cholalchem, meaning to say that who you created, meaning to say create them with the ability to have children. So hew them out so that they could have children. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Baravua, Sarah Imeinu, Sarah, our matriarch, Ilonis Haisa. Ilonis is a woman who has some sort of congenital situation that she's not able to have children. As it states, Vatihi Sarai Akara Ein La Vlad. Sarah was barren, she had no Vlad. What's a Vlad? A Vlad is it's redundant. She is barren, she has no children. Of course, if she's barren, she has no children. So it means that filo based Vlad in law, she didn't even have a uterus. Amar Rav Yehuda, Breder Shmuel Bar Shilas Mishmei Derav. So, by the way, that's why Sarah laughed, because she says, how am I going to have a child? I don't have a uterus. So that was a tremendous miracle. Says Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel Bar Shilat Mishmei Derav. When do we say you have 10 years before you have to divorce your wife? If she has no children, that's only in the earlier generations, Shnosei and Merubos, where they lived a very long time, like Abraham and Isaac. But in the later generations, Shnosei and what? Now we have a much shorter lifespan. Then all you get is 2.5 years, connected in the time of 3 pregnancies. And Rav Amar, so then the Rav Amar Rav Nachman says, Shalosh Shanim connected Shalosh Pekidos. You get 3 years corresponding to the 3 Pekidos. That means the three people God remembered on Rosh Hashanah. We're going to see in a moment. The Amar Barafuna. The Amar Mar Rosh Hashanah Nifkedu Sarah Rachel Chana. On Rosh Hashanah, Sarah was remembered, and Rachel was remembered, and Chana was remembered. Amar Rava Leisnu Ahani Klali. So Rava says we don't accept all these principles that you have either 3 years or 2.5 years. We don't have it. We don't say that the 10-year change no longer applies today because we live less. Because Masnisin Mantikin, who wrote the Mishnah? The Mishnah wasn't written in the time of Abraham where they lived longer. The Mishnah was written in the time of Rebbe. and Rebbe was around the second century. So, and we know that in the time of Rebbe, it was already people were living normal lifespans. So we made David imot shani. In the time of David, we reduced to 70 years. People live 70 years. So the Gemara says, why does it say he has to give her a ksuba? Because Shema was zachali banas minana. Maybe it's his fault. Maybe he's the one who didn't merit to have the child. And so therefore he has to give his wife a ksuba when he divorces her. Maybe it's her fault. The Gemara says, a woman is not commanded to have children. It's only the man who's commanded. And so therefore, God would not have punished her in that way. Or it says, Eini, is that the case? The Rabbanan said to Rav Abba bar Zivda, they told him, go get married with Bunny and have children. Amar lahu, he said to them, Izaka, if I was supposed to have children, I would have had it for my first wife. So we see from here that the man shouldn't go and remarry. Where it says, no, there he was just trying to get rid of the rabbis, get him off his back. Rabbi Abba bar Zivda, Rav Abba bar Zivda, we saw about this in Sunday's daf. He had become sterile from the Pirkei de Rav Huna. That Rav Huna gave a shear, and he kept the people too long, and when they needed to go to the bathroom, and that caused them to go sterile. Rav Gidol Yakrami Pirkei de Rav Huna, Rav Gidol also, the same thing happened. Rav Chabo also, Yakrami Pirkei de Rav Huna. All these rabbis became sterile because they didn't go to the shear. They didn't go to the bathroom during the shear. If you need to go to the bathroom during the Daf Yomi, go. I asked my wife if this is possible that you can become sterile by not going to the bathroom, and she said she did not believe so. Rav Sheishes, Yakarmi Pirkei de Rav Huna. Rav Sheishes also became sterile. Rav Achabar Yaakov, Achte Suskinta, he got this condition, which was Suskinta, which he could get sterile. Tell you about ours at the Beirav, they hung him upside down from a cedar tree in the yeshiva. Benafak mina minei kahutza yarka, and and green juice fell out of him. Amar Vachabar Yaakov Shitin Sabe Haviana. There were 60 scholars sitting in the shir, 60 elders. They all became sterile. Except for me. I'm the only one who didn't. Because I said wisdom will keep its owner smart. I went to the bathroom, so I didn't become sterile. So he said that if he divorced her because she wasn't able to have children, she's allowed to remarry somebody else. So the Gemara says, Sheni in, she can marry a second husband, but Shlishilo, but not a third one. Oh, Masnisa money. Gemara is going to now connect this to a dispute throughout the entire Talmud. At what point do we establish a presumptive status? Does it take 2 times to establish a presumptive status, or 3? So from our source, which says she can get married a second time, but not a third, we see that our mission is Rebbe. Tanya, what did Rebbe say? Let's say Rahman al-Tzlan Moa Rishon, let's say you circumcise a child, or Rahman al-Tzlan, the child dies. Sheni Umeis, you circumcise the child the second time the child dies. Shlishi Otimo. Divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says after 2 times you've established that it's a danger for this family, and they have this condition which causes the child to die at circumcision, but a 3rd time it's not a danger. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says Shlishi Timo. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says the 3rd one you should circumcise as well. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel establishes the presumptive status after 3 times, not after 2 times. But Revi will Timo. But the 4th time you don't. So Rebbe says you establish presumptive status after 2, whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says you establish it after 3. So our mission seems to be like Rebbe. Gemara says Vatanya Ipcha, but we have a source that says the opposite. Gemara says Hai Minai Lachri. Now, which one is meaning to say a source that says Rebbe says after 3, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says after 2? So Gemara says, well, which one was said later? Tashmad Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Well, we have a story of that Rabbi Yochanan taught. Ma'aseh ba'arbe achios b'tzipori. There was an incident with 4 sisters in Tzipori. Shemoa Rishona Umeis. The first one was circumcised her child, and Rahman al-Tzlan, he died. Shni Umeis, second sister brought it, and he died. 3rd sister brought it, he died. Revius Basel of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The 4th one, they finally went to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Amarla al Tamuli. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, don't circumcise him. So we see establishes the presumptive status after 3. The Gemara says, no, that's not a proof. Maybe if they come to him after the second one, before the third one, he would have said the same thing. The Gemara says, no. In Cain, Maya said, no, Rabbi Barabba is telling us a story. He's telling us testimony to prove that it was after the third time. The Gemara says, not necessarily. Maybe it's a different chiddush here. Maybe it's teaching us the achayos mechaskos. We had known that the child, that from one family you could establish the presumptive status that it's dangerous to give them a circumcision. But now we're seeing that it extends across sisters, not just the same mother, but even across multiple mothers within like sisters, genetics. So now that we've established that sisters, there could be danger amongst the sisters. A person should not marry a woman from Mishpachas Nikfin, from a family of epilepsy, or from a family of Mitzurayim or lepers, because they're going to have this genetic condition. That's where they've established with 3 cases of this condition. So my hobby, do we establish a presumptive status after 2 years or after 3 years, or after 2 times, after 3 times? Yatzer Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef, from Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef came from Eretz Yisrael. He said, Amar Uvda V'Kamei Rav Yochanan. He said there was once an incident with Rav Yochanan. The Kanishta de Ma'on b'Yom Kippurim was in the base Knesset on Yom Kippur in Ma'on. And what happened? Shechal Yos b'Shabbos, he was doing Kippur and Shabbos. Umoa Rishona, the first sister brought her child and she circumcised him. Umeis, and he died. Shniya, the second one, Umeis. He died. The third sister, Shlishis Balafanav, they came before Rabbi Yochanan. Amar la uchim muli. He said, the third one, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef says, Rabbi Yochanan said, still you have to circumcise him. So Amar Abaye says, Chazi de kasharis isura. Abaye said, you know what you did? You've allowed something that's prohibited, visakanta. First of all, it's dangerous, says Abaye, because 2 kids have already died. And second of all, since it's dangerous, now, therefore, you're not required to do the circumcision. And so what you're doing in the end is you're allowing the circumcision to take place on a time where it's prohibited, because if the circumcision is not allowed, you're violating the Shabbos and Yom Kippur by doing the circumcision. But nevertheless, even though Abaye said you shouldn't have done this, Abaye himself relied upon it when it came to himself, and he wanted to get married. Abaye wanted to marry a woman who had 2 husbands who died. Abaye should have established that it's dangerous, because we would have assumed that the woman was the reason why the husbands died, and that's what's called like a isha katonis, a killer. So Abaye relied upon the principle that it's not dangerous and he can marry her even though she had 2 husbands who died. Because what happened was Abaye went and married Chuma, the daughter of Isi, the son of Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. Because this woman, Chuma, she'd already been married to Rachava and he had died. And Rabbi Yitzchak prayed to Rabbi Bar Chana v'Shacham, and she married Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Bar Chana, and he died. So Abaye married her. Abaye said, no, you need 3 times. Here for himself, he found the loophole. But guess what? This Shachav, Abaye also died. So he shouldn't have done it. So how could Abaye have trusted Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef's ruling that after 2 times it's not enough to establish a presumptive status? Abaye himself was the one who said, Avin de Samcha. He said, Avin we can rely upon. What he says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, we can rely upon. Yitzchak Simcha, but Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, here is his nickname, Yitzchak the red one, maybe he had a red beard. Rav Bar Samcha, you can't rely upon him. Avin Yeshno B'Chazara. Avin, Rashi gives 2 pshatim. Either Avin always reviews his learning, or else Avin always knows, he's always with Rabbi Yochanan, he knows if he changes his mind. But Yitzchak Simcha, Eino B'Chazara. But Yitzchak Simcha, he doesn't know if Rabbi Yochanan changed his mind. And furthermore, maybe Rabbi and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel argue about circumcision, that one says you establish it after 2, the other one after 3. Do they also argue with respect to marriages? do they respect that there's a dispute with respect to marriages, whether it's 2 or 3 times, does the woman become a killer wife? But Tanya, the Gemara says yes, they do, as we learned. Rebbe says, don't marry her a 3rd time if she had 2 husbands who died. Whereas Rashbag says, and Rashbag says, by the 3rd wife, you could, if she has 3 husbands who die, you can marry her, but the 4th you can't. It makes sense with respect to circumcision. I understand why with circumcision you would say that if they've had a couple of children who died, you establish the concern that's dangerous. Because the Talmud understood, even back then, they understood there's some families that have different blood, and some of their blood is thin, and some of the blood is thick. So they understood that the blood doesn't clot. And that's why it's dangerous to circumcise. Elanisu in my time, what's the reason why you have to be concerned about a marriage? What's the problem? What could go wrong? How could the woman be killing her husband? So there's 2 theories. Mayan is a euphemism for the woman's where the woman has intercourse. Maybe when she has intercourse, she's killing you because she's something maybe disease or dangerous. You could get who knows what condition you could get. Rav Ashi says Mazel Gorim. No, it doesn't come from the intercourse. It comes from her bad luck. This woman is bad news. So my benayo, is there a difference? Ika benayo the irso mace. Let's say she dies. Let's say the guys died when they were just betrothed to the woman. So they never had intercourse, and so therefore it's her mazel. It's not her mayan. And or inami denafal midiko mace, or else maybe they obviously didn't die from intercourse because they fell off a palm tree and died. So okay, we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address your questions.